It was the shaky breath which first revealed her presence to him. The patio was covered in the white cold mass and weakly reflected the blue darkness and the warm shine from within the tall building. She had her upper back leaned against the wall while her wings were ending up in the gap between it and the wooden bench which should have been replaced years ago. Dew had only opened the door to let the air out of the stuffy kitchen and did not expect her to be here. It barely took him a second to decide. He reached out for his cape and went outside, seating himself right next to her. At first there was no obvious response from her. Her shivering continued while the air continued to escape from her mouth in clouds as if she would breathe fire at any moment. But Dew knew her skin to be warm but not hot any more. "The fire is still burning. Do you want to come inside?" Dew offered. Avery's chest widened as she took a deeper breath before standing up in one smooth motion. They sat by the fire on the 2 small chairs while the embers warmed their bodies. He had sealed off the room again. Tomorrow there would be enough time for air circulation. "Why were you outside? Need a key?" he asked while playing with his own key. She shook her head. "It's just as cold as the outside, I figured, and there is less noise than in the corridor. I've heard Paul and Rupert fight again. Those drunkards get on my nerves lately." "And whose blood is that?" He pointed at her knuckles. "Rupert's," he replied, and he nodded before going back into an absent-mindedness. He could lean against the wall of the fireplace. The open area was next to that, before the next wall started, where Avery was already resting hers. It was strange to not sit next to each other, but opposite one another, while the rests of wood were crackling in the heat in between them. Automatically, Dew reached for a new log from underneath the fireplace, threw it inside, and watched as it began to catch fire. "Does the cold add any appeal to me?" she suddenly asked, with a voice almost as quiet as the wind rushing through the small cracks in the patio door. Dew eyed her appearance. The red cloak reached down to her heavy leather boots, and all in all hid most of her complexion. Only where the edges crossed and by the lower sleeves he could see the hint of her lighter shirt. If one would have to describe it in one word, he would call it modest. The black cape was still laying over her shoulders, but didn't cover her wings any longer. The scarf was found tied around her waist. It was strange seeing her in a piece of clothing not associated with a specific male attire. It appeared tight around her upper body, but that was barely noticeable. "It solely depends on the person," he replied, sounding as if he was trying not to say anything wrong, but it was his honest opinion. She knew and wanted to know. "What do you think?" From miles away had he seen the question coming and had already made up his mind. It doesn't add appeal, but rather shifts the pre-existing appeal to be a little different. "I should have guessed that answer," she admitted, seeming neither relieved nor bothered by the response. Dew thought back to the darkness he had been locked in not even half a day ago. "It's because of what he said to you, right?" he noticed. Dew hadn't been able to understand what the king had said once he entered the room and began to speak to his daughter. His voice had been as quiet and incomprehensible as always, but Alba responded loudly. Rarely the one locked in the closet had been able to guess the content of the short conversation. Maybe the old man was going fully deaf. It wasn't only Alba who was responding. 2 or 3 questions had been directed towards the night. 2 must have been about the trip they had done to the outside, concerning places visited and safety. To the last one Avery had responded with thanks. It disturbed Dew. "It is," she confirmed. "He commented on it, didn't he?" "He said it looks good on me," Avery recalled, but quickly added, "It was nothing more than a compliment." "How are you supposed to know?" Dew replied, urgency in his voice, imagining her slowly slipping back into the kind of situation she had been in before, obedient before anything else. She lifted her right hand, showing her ring finger to Dew, and responded, "First of all, it's this here. Second of all, he gave me his word. His Majesty's advisor would need the approval to put you under pressure to write me off to the public first. The third reason is my full-time employment with his daughter, the princess. He never phrased it in a particular way, but he surely wouldn't want his own flesh and blood to be in the company of a whore. You don't know enough to judge. Unconsciously, his hands tightened and his face hardened. "Don't call him that," he uttered harshly. "Don't call yourself that. And what if he lies?" "Have you ever talked to him?" "I don't think so. Never as much as I did, and I know it isn't his style to lie. Leaving out details, sure, but not lie. It's something I do." "And when did he ever prove to care about your knowledge of a matter concerning you?" Dew snapped and darted his gaze at her. She sat up straight, while crossing her hands, but avoided his face. "The paper notes he gave me. Remember those? The ones you tore to shreds? He gave them to me and told me to use them to piece together the path. When he gave me the last one, almost 3 years ago, he said that this was it. It was all he knew and all I would need to have a vague direction to search." Saying he was taken aback would have been the same as saying Avery had just taken a light scratch when Jonah had attacked her. Dew could feel the revelation sink through his skin into his deep consciousness as he slowly began to comprehend its meaning. So long ago, and it was everything. "You said," he couldn't get himself to finish. It could have been over earlier. There had been no need for all of this. Not his work, not the pressure of trying to keep him alive, not his execution verdict or torture or her continuous suffering. They could have just left without a word. They could have hidden away in case the man would have persecuted them. "You lied to me," she audibly sighed before saying, "I did." "You lied to me. Why did you lie to me?" Dew repeated, his head heating up like the log beginning to glow in between the hot embers. "We could have been with your brother already. You could have ended up in a better state than whatever the husk before me is supposed to be." As soon as the words came out of his mouth, he regretted them. A husk. Jonah had used the same words. He didn't believe in Avery's future, and Dew found himself horrified as he realized he felt the same. "I told you you could leave," her voice quietly sounded. A streak of black and silver hair slipped out of the loose knot and fell into her downturned face. "You never said you could leave too, so why would I?" He found himself standing before her with his fists clenched. Her figure looked abnormally small underneath him. "I told you why I can't just this day," she coughed, making her body shake. "Did she?" "Why?" Dew asked without giving a second thought on what she said. He wouldn't find out anyway. It could have been anything. She spoke in riddles he didn't understand unless the solution was revealed. "I'm scared, Dew." Her head turned up in an instant. Avery's face was of stone, but one eye was enough to transmit her pure terror under the surface. He could see as it grew wet before she continued loudly, "And don't think I don't know I could possibly kill him, that he couldn't fight back, that I don't really owe him anything anymore. Since 5 days I know for sure that what he did to me was wrong, but it doesn't need someone with otherworldly abilities to mind control someone if you're weak enough, you know? And yes, I'm calling you stronger because you know how to hate." He sat back down. She was wrong, he wasn't stronger. Even without, he would have been easily pressured to act against his morals, so he believed. His palms pressed against his warm temples as he leaned downwards. She wouldn't see his face that way, and vice versa. At least he didn't cry. He wouldn't be as pathetic as 5 days ago, sitting next to her bleeding body, pitying himself. It was as if the fire wasn't burning right next to him. The wind became louder in his ears while the crackling fainted as if non-existent. "Can we leave?" he whispered, but received no reply. "Please." Still no response. "I can't do this shit anymore, neither can you," he heard himself cry out, while the cold drained even the last bit of anger out of his body and left nothing but sorrow. He shivered. Finally he heard something on her end, but it wasn't words or sounds from her lungs. It was the rustling of cloth being crumpled up and thrown to the ground. Then he heard her voice offering, "Come here." Before her laid the cape, folded several times. She held out her palms towards him, As if weights were tied to his wrists, neck and feet, Dew lifted himself up and forced every step towards her on his legs. Then he collapsed while he tried slowly sinking to his knees on the cape. Avery took his arms and placed them on her lap, where he crossed them to rest his head on top. Her hand fully touched his head for the first time in more than a month and stroked through the light hair. His face sunk into the red fabric which smelled of pine trees and salt water. A deep sigh escaped his chest. The comforting sensation travelled over his scalp into his head and awakened a new warmth which quickly spread throughout his nervous system. His ear twitched as she ran his finger over its edge and tucked the hair lying in his face behind it. The air of a soft, amused breath stroked by his temples. Her hand continued on to cup his jawline and have its thumb trace his cheekbones. "You skipped meals," she noticed. She was partially right, it wasn't a choice. Slowly he sunk into a daze, a calm, comfortable daze he could spend in her safety, and he was ready to listen to her words. "I need this," Avery whispered. "I need those 4 months. I gave a promise and I want to keep it because there's nothing else I've ever been able to fulfill. Leaving now wouldn't make a difference. You know as well as I do that he's out there and hasn't given up. He had been on the hunt since the last 9 years so he could kill that god, impress my mother and receive a blessing from her. He would have found me somehow, and who knows if I would have already passed away then. This place here, those walls and the people in it mean safety from this, no matter how twisted, humiliating and painful it is. What keeps you here is your attachment to me. What keeps me here is my addiction to the people here, Sue and Aaron and Rufus. I've hurt you. I hurt your body. I lied to you over and over again for years, and I didn't stop him from doing what he did to you, even though I could have guessed his intentions. I should have known you would not betray me. Still, you stay with me. Aaron has hurt me. He knew what had happened to Ophelia and knew what happened to me the moment I ended up in his unit, but all he did was to tell me to suck it up. And you already know part of what Rufus did to me, but I still can't cut my affection towards them. They have given me so much: a job, a place to stay, comrades, money, comfort, security, a sense of belonging and usefulness. Trust me that I don't lie here. I wish it was different. I wish I could just leave as much as I now want to live on, but I can't, and I'm sorry. The log was burned to a pile of orange by the time Dew heard the quiet closing of a door coming from upstairs. He couldn't bother less. This night he fell asleep, having his fingers loosely crossed with the hand reaching out from next to him. It wasn't burning hot, but at least it was still warm.